Welcome to today's episode of the L&D Clinic for HR Professionals, proudly brought to you by Habify, experts in making sure your staff remember what you train them. Hi everyone, welcome to the L&D Clinic. My name is Jordan Gray, and today we have Sylvia Stockhammer with us, who's going to be talking to us a little bit about the transformation that we're seeing happen in the HR space, as well as what companies are doing to help their employees. Sylvia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure.
You've been in the HR industry for about 17 years now, and you're currently the HR and digital transformation specialist at a large IT company. Now, as a digital transformation specialist, seeing the rapid shift to remote work in the recent weeks of lockdown, what is your opinion on how successfully we've done that? What has gone really well, and what aspects do you think need improvement?
That's a very good question, and it's been very interesting times, and I'm going to answer that in two parts, I think. I think what's gone really, really well is that companies have been communicating more with their employees, with their work, with their staff. We've set up coffee dates, we've set up, or virtual coffee sessions, I should say. We've set up, Zoom meetings, Skype meetings, whatever it is, to just communicate with each other and just to see how we're all doing through this state that we're currently facing in lockdown. What that's done is it's just really given individuals the ability to feel calm and reassured. It's kind of, had a touch on our emotional state. Just to give you an example, if I'm away from my laptop, I feel a sense of anxiety. Oh, what if I don't, have an opportunity to finish that last email? What I've noticed is that there's been a significant shift between work and life balance. Overnight, we've had to change our entire environment to having a home office and having a home school without any sort of intervention from outside help. I frequently hear people saying that they are working longer and harder, and that has created certain emotional states on people. So I think as a parent, any kind of sort of time that you're away from your child and their educational, learning paths through this period creates a sense of guilt. And as a professional, if you're away from your laptop, then you almost have this sense of anxiety. And those two are, they've really sort of shaped how I think people are interacting with each other.
Would you say that routine is very important?
I was just going to say that. So what I think has worked really well is creating a routine and committing to that routine. I think people feel safe when there is some sort of protocol in place, whatever the protocol might be work process, might be individual process. And if you feel that you've got some sort of structure or a plan, I always say having a plan is better than not having a plan. The companies that are struggling the most are those companies that have not invested in any form of digital or mobile platform to empower their workforce to work remotely. So that has certainly shifted from a like to have to a must have. And I think in order to future-proof any organization at all, they really need to start looking at ways of digitizing and mobilizing their workforce.
Well, talking about digitizing, we've seen an uptake in online learning and development training in the new world of work, in particular through e-learning. How do you feel about integrating more learner accountability into their training? Do you think a coaching, training hybrid would get better results? And I'll give an example. If you look at how people are currently learning, they go into a training session, They do the work, they leave the training session, and within 30 days, they've pretty much forgotten most of what they were trained on. And
Right.
if you want people to retain the knowledge, they actually need to practice it ongoing in order to have that memory retention. But for them to actually stick to e-learning, there's a certain amount of discipline that's required. So would you say that a combination of coaching, where someone's holding that learner accountable for their personal learning, would get better results?
Without a doubt, 100%. I think that with e-learning, the accountability sits on the learner themselves to complete the work. But, in reality, people are working and studying at the same time. So that means that there's lack of time for both. I feel that if there was some sort of coach or cheerleader that would be able to keep them on track, that would certainly close the gap. I do a lot of work with, or a lot of talks on the 5 generations. For the first time ever, we've got the 5 generations working in today's workforce.
Those 5 generations, you're talking about traditionalists, the baby boomers, X, Y, also known as the millennials, and then obviously
Correct.
Gen Z, all mixed together.
Yes, the Gen Zs. Yeah, we're starting to see that the latest generation is starting to enter the workforce as well. And having worked with them, their motivations and needs and ways of approaching things are all very, very different. You find that having very long courses no longer keeps the attention of your millennials or your Gen Zs. And that means that the courses should be somewhat shorter and somewhat easier to consume. And from that perspective, I think that having a coach on hand, as I said, would certainly alleviate that, because the individual would commit not only to themselves, but also they would commit to the coach, which is a really good practice.
People associate having a coach with a capital outlay because coaches are expensive. But if there was a means to have every single staff member who's engaging in training or micro-learning after a training session and having access to a coach, almost coaching en masse, I think that really speaks into what you're saying, that it would be of huge benefit to employees. But what do you do as an experienced HR professional to make sure that the content covered in L&D training actually sticks? And what impact does knowledge application and transfer have on the empowerment of those learners or your staff?
So the first thing I'd like to say is that we don't just learn in a classroom setting or in an e-learning session. Knowledge transfer happens day to day. It happens, like you said, as you practice something. If I had to create a course for a millennial or for a Gen Z, I would really ensure that that course is broken down into as many granular sort of bite-sized pieces as they can. The reality is that people are working and learning at the same time. So if a learner would be able to potentially do a piece or a section of a course that, first of all, wouldn't be so overwhelming, and secondly, if they could do it while they're commuting, potentially on their lunch break, that would certainly help. I'll give you a personal example. My son is in grade 7 at the moment, and yes, he is going back to school on Monday, which is certainly going to create a huge dynamic shift once again in our lives. But I signed him onto an online e-learning platform where the lessons are literally 10 minutes long, and thereafter he simply does an assessment. And there's an element of gamification and social collaboration. I, as a parent, am able to log in, and what I've noticed with him is that what he learns in those short 10 minutes is retained much longer than in traditional 60-minute or 45-minute lessons.
Sylvia, don't hold out on us. There's a lot of parents that are watching this video right now that want to know, what is it called?
It's Worksheet Cloud.
Okay.
Yes.
Interesting. Go and check that out. Worksheet Cloud for your kids' learning. So let me ask you, what have you seen in terms of what companies are doing to support their staff? Look, obviously with lockdown, things have been all over the show, and obviously we're moving through levels. Hopefully we're not going backwards or in reverse levels. What have you seen companies do to help their staff?
Our organization has done a number of things. First of all, they've really reached out to us as individuals to make sure that we're coping in whatever capacity. They've enabled us in being able to work from home. I've seen other companies actually, as we were notified that we were going to be in lockdown, buy hardware, software, and issue that to their staff before the lockdown, so that they were able to continue working, hopefully as seamlessly as possible. Yeah.
Sylvia, you obviously have your ear to the ground, and you really are tuned in to what's happening out there. Have you seen any positives that have come up during this lockdown period?
I think we're also overwhelmed with all the doom and gloom notices that are flying around. And what I've seen in the recent weeks is that we're already living the new normal, number one. And I actually want to read a quote, which I absolutely love. It's by Leon Megerson. It says, "It's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one that is most adaptable to change." I've actually got a slideshow that I'd like to share with you. Some of the things that I've picked up are what the pandemic has actually created. And I've grouped it into something called the 3 Ps of pandemic: position, pre-pandemic, and post-pandemic. So if we had to rewind to about 3 months ago, 4 months ago, and you had conversations with some of the C-suite members, I think that the conversations would be very different to what we are seeing now. So if we look at the likes of your HR community, their conversations would have been about processes, compliance, and how do we win this war on talent. If you speak to them now, it's all about how do we show empathy and care for our people. If you had to look at the CIOs and CTOs, the conversations would have been very much around digital innovation, robotics, AI, data, and security. What are they talking about now is how quickly can we innovate to ensure that our people can work remotely. Next up, we've got the chief sales and chief marketing officers, and their strategic objectives were around marketing, driving sales, and obviously to create brand awareness. And if you look at what they're talking about now, it's how does our brand show, or does our brand show that we care for our customers? If we look at what the financial officers and operational officers would speak about, it would be how do we reduce costs? How do we optimize what we have right now? And today's conversations sound a little bit more about how do we support our people and our business right now? And of course, that all leads into the CEO, which is really focusing on what do we as a company need to do to survive this? So if I had to summarize the 3 Ps of the pandemic and the conversations and the focus in the difference of words is around care, empathy, and most of all people. And I think that's really what gives us all hope. I think it's enabling, it enables humans and companies, and also goes back to the quote that I read out earlier, which is the possibility of adapting. And while humans have adapted, humans are the driving force behind companies. Without humans, we don't have an organization. And so I think companies also need to look at how can they future-proof themselves by innovating and having digital and mobile ways of enabling their workforce.
Sylvia, if I can jump in there, something that stood out for me from that quote from Leon Megerson is it really comes down to adapting or dying. And, those that don't adapt will fall by the wayside, especially with 4IR around the corner. In fact, we're already there. And I think we're going to start seeing a number of companies really shutting down because they're just not agile enough. And looking at that slide that you shared with the C-suite and, what was previously or pre-lockdown versus where we are now, the two different approaches. Something that stands out for me is that it's about people. It doesn't matter what kind of business you're in. If you're engaging with another human being, whether it's through a laptop or face-to-face, you are in the people business. And as an entrepreneur, I'm acutely aware that you cannot build a business. You build people. People then build the business. I'm loving the fact that people are starting to see that. And I think it's long overdue. People finally have taken a bit of a step back, some more uncomfortable than others. But I think people are starting to review where they're at and starting to see what's truly valuable as opposed to, it's just about the bottom line. I have one more question for you, Sylvia. As it stands right now, we are moving through levels of lockdown. We don't know if it's going to get better. We don't know if we're going to revert back to level 5. But there is a burning question out there around what companies can do to empower their staff should the lockdown continue. Your thoughts?
So I've been speaking to a lot of different companies and again a lot of different C-suite individuals. And firstly, you are 100% right. The fact that the focus has shifted to people and how does one empower them? Well, the only way to empower them is to be able to keep food on the table, keep the lights on. And if a company is not future-proofed in their mobile digital solutions, unfortunately, that's going to affect people. And the last thing I'd like to say is that never stop as an organization to talk to your workforce. They need to hear from you. They need to be reassured. That is the most critical element. And I think that is something that a lot of companies have done well. And some companies need improvement on, I think.
Sylvia, thank you so much for joining us today on the L&D Clinic. It has been insightful, and hopefully lockdown doesn't continue for too much longer and we finally get a handle on this pandemic. Have a wonderful day and look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the L&D Clinic. If you have someone you would like us to interview, please drop us a line and we'll do our best to make that a reality. Thanks for tuning in.